The galaxy was wide and full of powerful empires, but when they looked at Earth, they saw nothing but a small and primitive world. To the aliens, humans were children playing with fire, noisy and careless, but too weak to matter in the grand design of the stars. The Galactic Council, a great assembly of many alien species, laughed whenever the name of Earth was spoken. They called humans savages who still fought among themselves, who had barely learned how to cross the void of space, who built fragile ships that could break with a single strike. In their shining halls, the alien rulers mocked the idea that humans could ever stand equal with them. At one council meeting, the laughter was loudest when an alien warlord raised his hand and spoke. His voice was sharp, his teeth glimmered in the council light, and he declared that humans were not just primitive, they were an insult to the stars. They crawl on their planet like insects, he said. They cannot even build ships that last a century. They fear the dark. Why should we allow them to call themselves a spacefaring race? His words spread through the hall like fire. Some aliens beat their fists on the tables in agreement, others hissed in amusement. Not one voice rose to defend humanity. The alien warlord continued, speaking of punishment, of lessons, of the need to show Earth what power truly was. We should remind them of their place, he said coldly. If we do not, they may one day imagine themselves strong. His words carried weight, for he commanded not one, but two vast fleets, each armed with weapons that had crushed countless worlds before. The council agreed with nods and grins. In that moment, the insult was carved into the record of the stars. Humans were declared weak, primitive, and unworthy of respect. Far away, on Earth itself, people had no idea what was being spoken about them. They lived their lives, building, dreaming, fighting, hoping, without knowing that in the deep dark above, powerful eyes had chosen them as a target. The insult was not spoken to their faces, but soon, they would feel its sharp edge. Weeks later, the skies above Earth stirred. Human satellites, small metal watchers orbiting silently, began to detect something strange. Dots appeared at the edge of their vision, moving with unnatural speed, growing larger by the hour. The dots became fleets, vast shapes blotting out the stars. Two alien armadas, built of black steel and humming with endless energy, had set their course for Earth. Each ship was a monster, larger than mountains, glowing with the fire of alien engines. The commanders of these fleets, proud and arrogant, laughed as they looked upon the blue planet from afar. To them, this was not war. It was a hunt, a game, a lesson to be written in blood. On Earth, leaders gathered in secret rooms, their faces pale as reports poured in. The fleets were too large, too advanced, too powerful. Some whispered surrender, others demanded negotiation, but one truth burned in every heart: humanity had been mocked, and now that mockery had become a threat. The people of Earth had only two choices: kneel before the aliens, or fight with everything they had. As the alien warlord's voice echoed across human channels, his message was cruel and simple: primitive humans, surrender your world, or we will erase you. His words were meant to crush hope, but instead, they lit a fire. Across cities and villages, across seas and deserts, ordinary men and women felt the weight of the insult. They felt the sting of being called weak, of being told they were nothing. Soldiers sharpened their weapons. Scientists worked in secret labs. Families whispered promises to survive. Humanity would not kneel. The fleets drew closer, their shadows falling over Earth like the wings of death, and the stars seemed darker than ever. The insult had been spoken, the challenge had been given, and in the silence of space, the future of mankind trembled on the edge of war. The alien armadas moved like storms across the sky, silent but heavy with the promise of destruction, and soon their black ships stood above Earth like gods staring down at mortals, their shadows blotting out stars and moonlight as millions of human eyes looked upward in terror and awe, some believing it was the end of the world, others clinging to hope that maybe, somehow, this was only a threat and not a slaughter. In the war rooms of Earth, leaders argued in voices shaking with fear. Some wanted to beg for peace, others shouted that no foreign conqueror could ever be allowed to chain humanity, and their words collided like thunder until one sound silenced them all: the sudden transmission from the alien warlord, broadcast across every human channel, filling every television, every radio, every device with his face and his voice. a cruel grin stretching across his features as he spoke in a tongue translated by cold machines. "Humans of Earth," he said, his voice dripping with scorn, "you are primitive, weak, fragile. Your weapons are toys, your ships are scraps of metal, your world is nothing but a stone floating in space. You are not worthy of the stars. You will surrender, or you will burn." His words spread across the globe in moments, reaching deserts, mountains, seas, and cities, and as people listened, fear filled their hearts, but anger too began to grow like fire in dry grass, for though the aliens spoke with power, their voice carried insult and cruelty, and no human could hear it without feeling the sting of humiliation. In one hidden base deep below the ground, generals and scientists gathered around glowing screens that showed the massive fleets in orbit, their numbers impossible to count, their weapons beyond human understanding, and still the humans whispered to each other, refusing to give in. "We will fight," one general said with trembling hands, "because if we do not, then there will be nothing left to fight for." Across the planet, ordinary people prepared in silence, soldiers loading their rifles, pilots climbing into cockpits, families holding one another tightly as though their arms could shield against fire from the skies, and everywhere there was the same unspoken truth: humans would not kneel. The first contact between the fleets and Earth was not peace, but a show of power. From orbit, one alien ship released a beam of pure energy that struck the ocean, boiling the water and sending waves taller than towers crashing across coastlines, a warning shot to remind humans of what was coming if they resisted. Screams rose from cities, panic swept through streets, and yet in the fear there was also fury. People cried out that they would never surrender, that Earth was their home, that no alien could take it. Even in the darkest night, resistance began to burn like small lights scattered across the globe. The alien warlord laughed as he saw their panic, certain that fear would break them, certain that humanity would bow, but he did not see the plans moving quietly beneath the surface. Human satellites sent coded signals, hidden ships adjusted their positions, and scientists whispered of secret projects that might turn weakness into strength. Unknown to the aliens, Earth had been preparing in silence ever since the first whispers of invasion had reached them, and though their weapons looked like toys to the galaxy, they had been crafted with desperate care. The warlord sent another message, colder than before: "This is your last chance. Bend your knees, or we will erase your world from the map of stars." But instead of surrender, he received only silence from Earth. Cities went dark, radio channels cut off, governments spoke no answer, and the alien commander frowned for the first time, sensing that the prey he thought so weak might not be as simple as he imagined. Then, as the fleets drifted closer, the first human defenses came alive. From hidden bases, missiles rose like fiery arrows into the night, streaking toward the massive ships with thunder in their wake, and though the alien shields deflected most, some slipped through, burning across metal hulls and tearing holes in ships that were supposed to be untouchable. Sparks danced in the void, explosions flared, and for a heartbeat, the aliens stopped laughing. From the ground, people saw it: giant ships wounded by human fire, and for the first time since the fleets had arrived, a cheer rose instead of a scream. Humanity had answered the insult, not with surrender, but with defiance, and though the skies were still full of death, the warlord now knew that Earth would not fall without a fight. The first contact had been made, and it was not the conquest the aliens had promised. It was the beginning of war. The alien fleets swarmed above Earth like dark clouds, their ships blotting out the stars, their weapons glowing with deadly power, and though their commanders had laughed at the first human missiles, that laughter faded when damage reports arrived showing that some of their great vessels had been scarred, pierced, even crippled by what they had called primitive fire, for the humans had aimed with precision and struck with fury, proving they were not prey to be crushed in a single blow but fighters who would not die quietly. Yet still the warlord smiled with arrogance, believing the battle was his, for his fleets outnumbered and outgunned anything Earth could hope to unleash, and so he ordered his armadas deeper, commanding them to move closer into orbit, to bring their weapons within range of every human city, but he did not see that this was exactly what the humans had planned. From secret bases hidden in mountains, oceans, and underground bunkers, human commanders had been watching every move of the alien ships, mapping their patterns, studying their arrogance, and waiting for the moment to spring the trap, for they knew they could not meet the fleets in open battle, they could not trade fire against such overwhelming power, but they could lure them, deceive them, pull them into the shadows where the battlefield favored Earth. In the silence of deep space, far from the eyes of the Armadas, human ships drifted quietly, cloaked in darkness, their engines cold to avoid detection, their hulls painted black against the void, like hunters waiting in the brush, and when the alien fleets pushed further into the orbit of Earth, those hidden hunters began to move. On the ground, civilians watched the skies, praying as streaks of light crossed above, some thinking it was the end, others whispering that maybe it was a sign of hope, and deep inside the war rooms, commanders gave the order in steady voices, "Activate Phase 2." In that instant, signals flashed across hidden satellites, coded beams linked across space, and the trap came alive. Suddenly, the alien systems began to flicker. Their sensors, which had scanned the skies with perfect clarity, now blurred with static, their communications filled with noise, their targeting arrays scrambled as though shadows had crept into their very machines, for human scientists had spent years building weapons not of raw power but of deception, jamming signals, hacking codes, bending light itself, and now those weapons struck like invisible knives. Alien captains shouted in confusion as their great ships struggled to lock onto targets, their screens full of false readings, phantom fleets, and endless echoes. Some saw dozens of human ships where there were none, others saw clear skies where danger waited, and their formation broke as fear spread among them. Then the first hidden human ship revealed itself, bursting from the darkness with sudden fire, its weapons tearing across the hull of an alien cruiser, sending flames and debris spinning into the void. Before the warlord could react, another ship emerged from the shadows, then another, until the black silence was alive with human steel, not hundreds, but enough to strike, enough to wound, enough to remind the aliens that humans had teeth. Missiles screamed, railguns roared, and even as alien shields deflected many blows, enough found their mark to cripple ships that had never before known fear. The warlord roared in rage, ordering his fleets to crush the insects, but the harder they tried to fight, the deeper they stumbled into the trap, for every movement had been predicted, every response studied, every step prepared. Human commanders did not fight where the aliens were strongest. They struck where the shields were weakest, where the fleets were scattered, where confusion was greatest, and each blow carried the weight of defiance, the voice of a species refusing to die. Across Earth, people watched the skies, some with tears, some with cheers, as the darkness above flickered with fire, and for the first time since the invasion began, hope spread like a spark across a dry forest. The aliens had thought they would crush humanity in hours, but now hours stretched into days, and the warlord's certainty began to waver, for he could not deny that his armadas were bleeding, and in his heart, though he would never admit it, he felt a flicker of something he had never felt toward humans before: fear. The trap had been sprung, the prey had become the hunter, and in the silence of space, the war had only just begun. The trap had torn holes in the alien armadas, but the war was far from won, for though many alien ships burned in silence and debris scattered across the void, the fleets still outnumbered and outgunned every human vessel, and the warlord, though shaken by the unexpected resistance, was not a creature who would retreat. His pride would not allow it, and so with a roar of fury he ordered his fleets to unleash their full power. Beams of energy brighter than suns lanced across the dark, cutting through space and striking at human positions. Some missiles were vaporized before they could reach their targets, some hidden bases were exposed and burned to ash, and human ships that had fought bravely were torn apart in bursts of fire. Yet even as the losses mounted, humanity did not break. For every strike they suffered they answered with another, their weapons weaker but guided with precision, their pilots outmatched but fearless, and in the chaos of the counterattack, the battle became a storm of fire and shadows. The alien warlord laughed again, a cruel and broken sound, believing the tide had turned back in his favor, but beneath his laughter was a seed of unease, for his ships were bleeding faster than he had expected, his commanders were shouting in panic, and his fleets, once perfect in formation, now moved in confusion, for the humans refused to fight by any rules he understood. They did not stand still and die. They did not charge blindly. Instead they struck from places no one had expected, then vanished, then struck again, like ghosts haunting the dark, and the warlord realized that what he thought was weakness was in truth a dangerous kind of strength, a desperate fire that burned hotter than fear itself. Across the surface of Earth, people heard the thunder from above. They saw the skies flash as if lightning had taken root in space, and though many wept for the lives already lost, they also lifted their voices in defiance, shouting into the night that humanity would not kneel, and those shouts gave strength to the soldiers fighting in orbit, men and women who knew that every second they held the line meant their families, their children, their world still had a chance to live. Then came the moment that shook even the aliens to silence, for in the heart of battle, one massive alien dreadnought, a ship the size of a continent, turned its guns toward Earth itself, intending to fire a blast that would erase an entire city. But before the order could be carried out, 3 human ships, small and fragile compared to the giant, hurled themselves forward, ignoring the odds, ignoring the fear, driving straight into the path of the dreadnought, their weapons firing at full power until their hulls cracked and their engines burned, and though all 3 were destroyed, their sacrifice ripped open the side of the alien monster, sending it spinning helplessly into the void, flames pouring from its broken core. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, both sides stunned by the courage of those who had died, and in that silence, the warlord's rage boiled into fury, for he had not expected such defiance, not from a race he had mocked as primitive, not from people he believed were nothing, and his voice roared across the comms promising to erase Earth with his own hands. Yet his commanders, though loyal, could not hide the fear in their eyes, for they had never seen prey bite back with such savagery, and they began to wonder if they had marched into a battle they could not win. The humans pressed on, their counterstrikes growing bolder, their traps growing deadlier, their courage rising with each alien loss, and though ships fell and cities burned, the warlord realized with horror that the battle he had expected to last minutes was stretching into an endless struggle, and each hour that passed was another hour the humans learned, adapted, and grew stronger. Across Earth, the people held their breath, watching with desperate hope as the fire above grew brighter, and though no one knew how the war would end, all of them understood that humanity had already proven something to the galaxy. They were not weak, they were not prey, they were not primitive, and as the warlord stared into the void filled with burning wreckage of ships that had once been his pride, he could no longer laugh, for in the screams of his dying fleets, he heard a truth he could not deny: the humans had become hunters in the dark. The battle burned across the skies above Earth like a storm that would never end, human ships striking from shadows, alien armadas unleashing fire that tore through oceans and mountains, and still neither side had broken. But the warlord knew he could not let this struggle continue. For every hour that passed his fleets grew weaker while the humans only grew bolder, and so he called for the weapon he had sworn to keep hidden until the final moment, the weapon that would crush the spirit of Earth once and for all, a ship so vast it was not truly a ship but a moving fortress, a titan forged from black metal and armed with a core that could unleash a sun's fury, a vessel designed not to fight armies but to erase entire worlds in a single blast. When the doomsday ship emerged from the void, its shadow stretched across the heavens like a wound in the stars, and even the bravest human pilots felt fear freeze their hearts, for nothing they had ever seen compared to its size and its power, its guns glowing with energy that hummed louder than thunder, its engines burning brighter than cities, and on Earth, people looked up and whispered prayers, believing their time had come. The warlord's voice thundered once more across human channels, his grin full of cruel triumph as he declared, "This is the end of your defiance, primitive creatures, watch as your world turns to ash," and his words sent chills through every home, every bunker, every battlefield. But still the humans refused to kneel, their voices answering in silence, their eyes fixed on the sky, their will unbroken even in the face of such horror. Deep below the ground, in a hidden bunker where screens flickered and machines hummed, a group of scientists and commanders exchanged grim looks, for this moment was the one they had feared, the reason they had built their last hope in secret. A weapon unlike anything the aliens expected, born not from advanced alien designs but from human stubbornness, creativity, and desperation. A weapon built in silence using ancient theories the galaxy had abandoned, theories too unstable, too dangerous, too wild for the aliens to even consider. But humans had no choice, for they knew survival meant daring what others would never dare. As the doomsday ship charged its main cannon, the air above Earth shimmered with light, waves of energy sweeping across the planet, making oceans rise and mountains tremble, and people clutched each other in terror as alarms screamed. But in the shadows of orbit, a small fleet of human ships moved into position, protecting a single vessel that was not like the others, a vessel sleek and strange, built in secret deep within the Earth, its heart glowing with unstable power, its crew silent and grim, knowing their mission could end in their deaths. This was humanity's secret weapon. A weapon not of size or brute force but of science the aliens had long dismissed, a device that could twist gravity itself, bend the rules of space, and turn the heart of the battlefield into a trap even for a giant. As the alien warlord prepared to fire his cannon, the human vessel launched, vanishing into the dark and reappearing closer than the aliens thought possible, slipping past their shields as though they were paper, moving like a ghost through the void, and the alien commanders shouted in shock as they tried to lock onto it, their weapons firing wildly but hitting nothing, for the ship bent space itself to slip between blasts. Then, in one voice, the human crew activated the device, and the void screamed as invisible hands pulled at the doomsday ship, twisting its engines, tearing at its core, making its own energy spiral out of control. The warlord roared in fury, ordering his ship to resist, to fire, to crush the humans, but it was too late. The weapon had already awakened, and the massive fortress that was meant to burn Earth began to shake apart from within, its glow turning into fire, its cannon exploding before it could release, and in moments the pride of the alien armadas became a tomb of twisted metal, breaking into pieces as human fire tore through its wounded hull. On Earth, people looked to the skies and saw the impossible, the giant falling, its fire scattering like stars across the night, and for the first time since the invasion began, cheers rose louder than cries, voices shouting that humanity had struck down a god. Yet in the warlord's fury, there was also fear, for he had seen what humans had done, how they had used forgotten science to destroy what he thought was invincible, and deep inside he realized a truth that chilled him more than any weapon, that these so-called primitives were willing to risk everything, to fight with madness and courage no alien empire could match. The secret weapon had turned the tide, but the battle was not yet over, for though one armada had lost its heart, the second still roared in the void, ready to fight to the last, and as humans celebrated, commanders warned that the darkest hours were still ahead. The destruction of the doomsday ship shook the battlefield like thunder, its massive wreckage burning across the void as shards of glowing metal fell into the atmosphere like dying stars, and on Earth the people shouted with joy, for they had seen the impossible, the greatest weapon of the alien fleets destroyed by human hands. Yet even as hope spread across the planet, the war was not finished, for the second armada still circled above, tens of thousands of ships armed with fire enough to scorch a world, their commander furious at the loss of their pride, their voices filled with rage as they swore to erase humanity in a storm of vengeance, and under the command of the warlord, they regrouped, their formations tightening, their weapons glowing brighter than ever before, ready to unleash a wave of destruction that no secret weapon could stop. The humans knew what was coming, they knew the armada would not retreat, and so their commanders gave one final order across every channel, to fight with everything they had, to give no ground, to spend every weapon, every ship, every life if needed, for this was the moment when the fate of Earth would be decided. Either they would stand together and strike down the armada or they would fall into silence forever. In orbit, the battlefield erupted once again, human ships darting like shadows between giants, unleashing missiles, railguns and beams of stolen alien tech, their weapons cutting through armor and piercing engines, while the alien ships returned fire with blinding force, each blast tearing through the void with enough power to split continents, and the darkness of space became alive with fire, explosions blooming like suns, debris scattering in waves, screams of dying crews echoing across comms until they were silenced by static. But still the humans pressed forward, their courage greater than their fear, their voices steady even as their ships burned, for they knew that every second they fought was another second Earth remained free, and their defiance struck terror deeper into alien hearts than any weapon. The warlord screamed in fury, his command ship towering above the battle, directing waves of fire against the humans, and yet the more he pushed, the more his fleets faltered, for his ships were no longer fighting a primitive race, they were fighting hunters who had turned the darkness into a weapon, and each trap, each strike, each desperate move tore more of his armada apart. Then came the moment the galaxy would never forget, when the humans revealed the true scale of their secret technology. Not just one experimental ship but dozens of smaller vessels equipped with unstable cores, each able to twist gravity and tear apart the shields of giants, and one by one they slipped into the enemy formations, vanishing and reappearing, bending space to strike at close range, ripping alien ships apart from the inside. The armada screamed in panic, commanders begging for orders, captains shouting in terror as their vessels were torn into shards by weapons they could not predict, and soon the mighty fleet that had once seemed untouchable was bleeding out into the void, its numbers shrinking faster than it could recover. On Earth, people held their breath as reports flooded in, their fear turning into awe, their awe into roaring hope, for it was clear now that the armada was no longer the hunter but the hunted, and humanity, once mocked as primitive, had become the predator of the dark. The warlord, wild with rage, swore he would not be defeated. He promised he would drag Earth into ruin, even if it cost his life. And so he unleashed his last gamble, ordering his command ship to dive toward the planet itself, intending to crash it into the surface and burn millions in one final act of spite. But the humans were ready. A squadron of their strongest ships, damaged and burning but still flying, hurled themselves into the path of the giant, their weapons firing without pause, their engines roaring as they slammed into the command vessel, tearing through its shields, breaking its hull, and at last, with a blast that lit the heavens brighter than dawn, the warlord's flagship exploded, his voice cut off in a scream that echoed across every channel before fading into silence. The second armada, leaderless and shattered, broke apart in panic, some ships destroyed by human fire, others fleeing into the void, their screams carrying tales of terror back to the galaxy, and in that moment the battle was over. Two alien armadas, proud and powerful, had died screaming in the darkness, and Earth still stood. Across the world, people poured into the streets, tears mixing with laughter, voices rising in triumph, for they had faced the storm and survived, they had faced the insult and answered it with fire, and the stars themselves now carried the truth that could never be erased. Humanity was not weak, not primitive, not prey, but a force that even the greatest fleets could not crush. Yet as the smoke cleared and the silence of space returned, hidden eyes watched from afar, silent empires that had not joined the war but had seen everything, and while some trembled, others whispered plans of vengeance, for though the armadas had fallen, the story of humanity was only beginning, and the galaxy would never again be the same. The silence after the battle was almost unbearable, the stars no longer filled with fire but with drifting wreckage, broken pieces of alien ships floating like dead giants in the void, their glowing cores fading into cold darkness, and on Earth the people looked up to skies that were scarred yet free, their hearts heavy with grief for those who had fallen but lifted by the truth that humanity had survived what no one believed possible. For two alien armadas had come with arrogance and fire, and now both were gone, their screams lost in the endless night, their pride shattered against the defiance of a world they had mocked as primitive. Across the cities of Earth, people poured into streets, voices rising in joy and sorrow together, children holding flags, elders crying as bells rang, families embracing under skies they feared they would never see again, and everywhere there was the same thought whispered like prayer, that mankind had proven itself, that no empire, no warlord, no galaxy could ever again call them weak. In hidden bunkers, commanders sat exhausted, their faces lined with ash and sweat, their eyes red with the memory of friends who had not returned, yet even in their grief they felt pride, for they had stood against the storm and refused to kneel, and the names of the lost were already being spoken with honor, heroes of Earth whose courage had lit the path for the living. The wreckage of alien ships was studied with careful hands, engineers marveling at technology once thought unreachable, scientists whispering of new discoveries that could now be theirs, and though the scars of battle were deep, the seeds of a stronger future were already being planted. But far beyond the cheers and the grief, in the cold stretches of space where no human eye yet watched, other empires were listening, their spies carrying tales of the impossible war, their rulers sitting in silent halls as they heard how humans had destroyed not one but two fleets that should have been unstoppable, and in their silence there was both fear and hunger, fear of what mankind might become if left unchecked, and hunger to test them, to break them, to claim their secrets before they grew too strong. In the shadows of distant stars, hidden fleets began to stir, not yet ready to move, but watching, always watching, and the galaxy whispered a new word with trembling voices: humanity. On Earth, leaders stood before their people and declared a new age had begun, not of peace, for they knew more wars would come, but of unity, for no longer could humanity afford to be divided, not after they had seen the power of the stars, and across borders, across languages, across oceans, people who once fought each other now stood side by side, for they had faced extinction together and survived, and survival had bound them stronger than blood. Children who had hidden in bunkers drew pictures of burning alien ships, their voices proud as they spoke of heroes in the sky, and songs were written about the day humanity rose, about the night the armadas died screaming in the dark, and those songs spread like fire, carried across every nation until the whole planet echoed with the story. Yet even as Earth celebrated, its scientists and soldiers prepared in silence, for they knew this was not the end, only the first chapter of a larger war, and though they had struck down two armadas, there were countless more in the galaxy, some stronger, some older, some waiting for their chance, and humanity's defiance would not be forgotten. In a quiet moment, One old general stood before the shattered remains of a human ship that had sacrificed itself to stop the alien dreadnought, his voice soft as he whispered to the ghosts of the crew that their deaths had not been in vain, that the world was alive because of them, and he swore under his breath that when the next enemy came, humanity would be ready. And somewhere in the vast dark, a hidden empire watched, their fleets silent but their eyes sharp, and their rulers spoke only one sentence as they studied the wreckage of the fallen armadas: the humans are dangerous. They must be watched. The galaxy had changed forever, the balance of power shaken, the myth of human weakness shattered, and as Earth turned slowly under the light of a battered but living sky, one truth became clear. Mankind had been dismissed as primitive, mocked as weak, but in the fire of battle they had proven themselves, and the stars would never again look at humanity the same way, for the story of defiance had only just begun, and the echo of it would carry through the darkness of the galaxy for ages to come.